The gravel crunched under my wheels as I rolled up to Uncle Jack's ranch, the sprawling Montana landscape unfolding before me like a forgotten dream. It was a stark shift from the life I'd known. The endless rotations in a desert far away, the cold, clinical halls of the VA hospital. Here, the sky stretched wide, a canvas of blue over the untamed wild. Uncle Jack was waiting, his silhouette rugged against the backdrop of his cabin. He'd aged since I last saw him, lines etched deep in his face like the land he tended. Vietnam had left its mark on him, just as the Middle East had on me.
Alex.
He nodded, his voice gravelly like the drive.
Uncle Jack.
I wheeled closer, feeling the weight of my new life with every turn of the wheels. We exchanged no formalities, just a mutual nod, the soldier's greeting. He eyed my wheelchair, a ghost of concern flickering in his steel trap eyes.
How's the new life treating you?
I shrugged, a wry smile touching my lips.
Been better. The paper let me go, said AI can write better than a beat-up vet.
His chuckle was dry as the Montana earth. We fell into silence, the kind only family can share. The ranch stretched around us, a reminder of simpler yet harsher truths. Uncle Jack broke the quiet.
Ranch keeps me busy. Solitude's a good companion.
I glanced around. The cabin, sturdy and worn, stood sentinel over a land that seemed to breathe with a life of its own.
Seems peaceful.
He grunted.
Mostly, except for the cattle. Found some half-eaten last week. Grisly scene.
I raised an eyebrow.
Predators?
Maybe, never seen anything like it before.
As we spoke, clouds began to gather in the once clear sky, casting long shadows over the land. A storm was brewing. I could feel it, both in the air and in the unspoken tension that lingered between us. Uncle Jack's gaze drifted to the horizon, his expression turning pensive.
Storm's coming, best get you settled.
He wheeled me inside, into the cabin that smelled of pine, and a lifetime of memories. As the door shut behind us, the first drops of rain began to fall, a prelude to the tempest that was about to unfold. The cabin felt like another world, a stark contrast to the open expanse outside. Pictures of a younger Jack, medals and mementos of a past life adorned the walls. It was a shrine to a life lived hard and unyielding, much like the man himself.
Make yourself at home,
Jack said, disappearing into the kitchen.
Got some stories to tell you about the ranch and other things.
I maneuvered my chair to face the window, watching as the rain began to lash against the glass, the wind singing a mournful tune. The storm was here, and with it, a sense of foreboding that settled in my bones. In the growing howl of the wind, I thought I heard something else, a strange, unnatural sound that seemed out of place in the wild chorus of the storm. I strained my ears, trying to discern what it was. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, swallowed by the tempest. And in that moment, I knew this was no ordinary visit. The storm outside was just the beginning, and the real storm was yet to come. The wind howled outside, a wild spirit unleashed, as Uncle Jack poured 2 cups of steaming coffee. The aroma, rich and earthy, mingled with the scent of aged wood that lined the cabin. He handed me a cup, his fingers weathered like the leather of an old saddle.
Tell me about these cattle,
I said, taking a careful sip. Jack leaned back, his eyes reflecting the storm's fury outside.
Been finding them half-eaten, torn apart, not like any predator I know. It's unnatural.
I frowned, memories of Army recon missions surfacing in my mind.
You think someone's doing this?
He shrugged, his gaze distant.
Dunno. It's got the other ranchers talking. Superstitions mostly.
The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless drumbeat. I looked out, watching the storm transform the landscape into a blur of gray and green. It reminded me of those days in the desert, the sudden, violent sandstorms that could change everything in minutes. Jack's voice, seasoned with the wisdom and weariness of age, broke my reverie.
The land has its own language. You listen close enough, it tells you things.
His words were like those of a shaman, full of an ancient, grounded knowledge. I nodded, thinking of my own experiences.
The desert taught me that. Silence speaks louder than noise.
Right.
He eyed me with a new respect.
You've seen things. Not many understand that.
Our conversation turned to life on the ranch, the rhythm of the seasons, the solitude. Jack spoke of the land with a reverence, a connection forged through years of toil and triumph. His stories were interspersed with my own, tales of distant lands, of camaraderie and loss. As night fell, the storm grew fiercer, the wind a howling banshee. The lights flickered, and for a moment, we were enveloped in darkness. Then the compound generator kicked in, its hum a steady undercurrent to the storm's wild song.
It's a good thing we've got the generator,
I said, glancing at the sturdy machine outside, visible through the rain-streaked window.
Always be prepared, that's what the ranch teaches you.
Jack replied, stoking the fire in the hearth. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, the heat a welcome contrast to the cold fury outside. We sat in silence, each lost in our thoughts, as the fire crackled and popped. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from outside, jolting us from our reverie. We exchanged a look, an unspoken understanding passing between us. Jack reached for his rifle, a relic from his Vietnam days, always kept within arm's reach.
Stay here,
he said, his voice a low growl. I grabbed my own weapon, a compact handgun I'd kept since my army days.
I'm coming with you.
He hesitated, looking at my wheelchair, then nodded. We made our way to the door, the wind screaming like a thing possessed as we opened it. Outside, the rain lashed at us, 1,000 icy needles. The generator hummed faithfully, its light a beacon in the storm. We scanned the area, but everything seemed in place.
Must have been the wind,
Jack muttered, but there was an edge to his voice, a tension that spoke of deeper fears. We headed back inside, our clothes soaked, our minds alert. No sooner had we settled back by the fire than the radio crackled to life, a voice cutting through the static.
Severe storm warning for the following areas.
Jack turned it off, his expression grim.
We're in for a long night.
I nodded, feeling a sense of foreboding. The storm was more than just a meteorological event. It felt like a harbinger of something darker, something as yet unseen. As we sat there, the wind's howl seemed to carry voices, whispers of things hidden and dangerous. It was like being back in the desert on those nights when the wind carried echoes of danger, of enemies moving in the shadows. Jack must have felt it too.
You hear that?
He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I listened, straining to separate the wind's cry from the other sounds. There it was again, a faint, unnatural noise, out of place in the storm's cacophony.
We should check the CCTV,
he suggested, his soldier's instinct kicking in. We moved to the bank of monitors that showed various parts of the ranch. In the storm's chaos, it was hard to see anything clearly, but one of the screens flickered, showing a brief image of something moving in the darkness.
There,
I pointed.
by the barn.
Jack squinted at the screen, his face taut with concentration.
Can't make it out. Could be nothing. Could be.
He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both understood the stakes. In this weather, any threat was amplified, any danger more deadly. We watched the screens for a while longer, but the figure didn't reappear. The storm raged on, a relentless force of nature that seemed to mock our efforts to understand its secrets. Finally, we turned away, the fire's warmth a small comfort against the cold uncertainty outside. We settled into an uneasy silence, each lost in our thoughts, the storm an ever-present reminder of our vulnerability. As the night deepened, the sense of isolation grew. The ranch, usually a haven of peace, now felt like a fortress under siege. The storm, the intruder, the mysteries of the mutilated cattle, they all wove together into a tapestry of suspense and danger. I looked at Uncle Jack, his face illuminated by the fire's glow. There was a resilience there, a strength honed by years of living on the land. But there was also something else, a hint of fear, a recognition that some things were beyond our control. The clock ticked on, the minutes stretching into hours. The storm showed no signs of abating, its fury a relentless assault on the senses. Then, as if on cue, the lights flickered and went out. The main generator had failed, plunging us into darkness. The storm's howl seemed to grow louder, a triumphant roar at our newfound vulnerability. In that moment, cut off from the world, with no way to communicate with the police or anyone else for that matter, the ranch a dark island in a sea of chaos, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The storm had brought something with it, something that lurked in the darkness, waiting. And as I sat there, my heart pounding in the silence, I knew that the night was far from over. The real test was yet to come. In the palpable darkness, only the fire's embers offered a faint glow. The storm's roar was a constant companion, a reminder of our seclusion. Jack's breaths, labored and uneven, cut through the silence. I noticed his hands, once steady as rock, now trembling slightly.
Uncle Jack, you okay?
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He grunted, a non-committal sound that did little to ease my concern.
Just tired is all.
But it wasn't just fatigue. The signs were there. His pallor, the sweat on his brow despite the cold. I'd seen it enough in the army. Men pushing past their limits, ignoring the signs of their bodies shutting down.
You need to eat something,
I insisted, navigating my wheelchair to the kitchen.
Keep your strength up.
He waved me off, but I wasn't having it. I found some canned soup, heated it over the fire. The simplicity of the task, a stark contrast to the complexity of our situation. He ate in silence, the spoon shaking in his grip.
This storm,
He muttered.
ain't natural.
I didn't respond. There was truth in his words, a recognition that we were at the mercy of something far greater than ourselves. The storm was a beast, untamed and unforgiving. As he ate, I glanced at the CCTV monitors, their screens dimly lit by a backup diesel-powered generator. The cameras, our eyes in the darkness, showed only sheets of rain and the occasional flash of lightning. Then, amidst the storm's chaos, a figure appeared. It was brief, just a shadow moving against the wind. But it was there. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of it. Human or animal, friend or foe. The storm obscured it all.
Uncle Jack,
I said, nodding toward the screen. He looked, squinting in the dim light.
Can't see much, could be anything.
But we both knew it wasn't anything. The cattle mutilations, the strange noises, they were pieces of a puzzle we were yet to solve. The storm raged on, relentless. Hours melded into each other, indistinguishable but for the changing intensity of the wind and rain. Jack's condition didn't improve. If anything, it worsened. He was a stubborn man, but even he couldn't fight his body's demands indefinitely. I kept watch, alternating between caring for him and monitoring the CCTV. The figure didn't reappear, but its brief visitation had heightened our sense of vulnerability. We were not alone, and whatever was out there was as much a mystery as the storm itself. At one point, Jack's breathing became so labored, I feared the worst.
we need to get you to a doctor.
I said, though I knew it was impossible. We were cut off, the storm a barrier as unyielding as any wall. He shook his head, a weak attempt at defiance.
Can't leave the ranch, not in this, and not with some guy roaming around.
I understood his sentiment. The ranch was more than just land. It was a legacy, a piece of him. But it pained me to see him like this, a shadow of the man who'd once seemed invincible. The night wore on, a test of endurance and resolve. I kept myself busy checking supplies, ensuring we had enough food and water. The generator's failure was a blow, but we were prepared in our own way. Jack's life on the ranch had taught him to be self-sufficient, a lesson he'd passed on to me in more ways than one. In the early hours of the morning, a new sound pierced the storm's cacophony. It was faint, almost drowned by the wind, but it was there, a rhythmic thumping, like footsteps. I froze, listening intently. The sound grew closer, then stopped. I waited, holding my breath, but it didn't resume. A trick of the wind, perhaps, or something else. The uncertainty was worse than any confirmed threat. Jack stirred, his eyes fluttering open.
What is it?
He rasped.
Thought I heard something.
I replied, my voice low. He tried to sit up, his body protesting.
Need to check it out.
No, you need to rest. I'll handle it.
He looked at me, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes.
Be careful, Alex.
I nodded, taking my handgun. The weight of it was familiar, a comfort in the unfamiliarity of our situation. I moved to the door, pausing to listen. The storm was a living thing, its voice a chorus of howls and whispers. I opened the door, the wind greeting me like an old enemy. Outside, the darkness was complete, the ranch a realm of shadows and unseen threats. I moved carefully, my senses heightened to every sound, every movement. The thumping sound didn't resume, and I saw no sign of the figure from the CCTV. But the sense of being watched was palpable, a pressure on the back of my neck. I returned to the cabin, the warmth a stark contrast to the cold outside. Jack was asleep, his breathing easier now. I felt a surge of relief, mixed with an unshakable sense of foreboding. The storm was more than just a meteorological event. It was a harbinger, a warning. And we were in the heart of it. Two men bound by blood and experience, facing an unknown threat in a world turned upside down. As dawn approached, the storm showed no sign of abating. We were in for another day of isolation, of waiting and watching. And somewhere out there in the heart of the storm was the key to the mystery that surrounded us. I settled back into my chair, my eyes on the dimly lit screens of the CCTV. The storm was our enemy, but it was also our ally. It hid us, even as it hid whatever was out there. And as the first light of dawn began to pierce the darkness, I knew that the coming day would bring answers. The storm and our diesel to power the backup generator couldn't last forever, and when it ended, we would face whatever it had been hiding. But for now, we waited. Two soldiers in a war of attrition against the elements and the unknown. And as the light grew stronger, a new sound joined the storm's chorus, a faint mechanical whirring coming from the direction of the barn. The day was beginning, and with it, a new chapter in our ordeal. The storm was far from over, and neither were we. The first light of dawn was a grim reminder of our precarious situation. As the storm continued its relentless assault, I knew our isolation was now complete. The phone lines were dead, a silence more ominous than the storm's fury. Jack's condition stabilized, but the danger was far from over. I maneuvered my wheelchair to the ham radio, the only link to the outside world. The radio's backup battery, a lifeline in the tempest, powered the radio, its static a familiar sound from my army days. Tuning the frequency, I sent out an SOS in Morse code and our coordinates, a rhythmic plea for help cutting through the storm's howl. Jack watched, his eyes heavy but alert.
Think it'll get through?
He asked, his voice weak.
It has to.
I replied, focusing on the task. The thought of being completely cut off was not an option. The radio crackled, but there was no response, only the endless white noise of a world turned upside down. I turned my attention to the CCTV monitors. The generator's steady hum was a comforting backdrop against the storm's chaos. Then, on one of the screens, a figure emerged from the swirling mists, a masked intruder moving with purpose across the ranch.
There!
I pointed, my voice tense.
By the north fence.
Jack strained to see, his face hardening.
Armed. Not good.
The intruder's presence confirmed our worst fears. This was no random event. We were targeted, a fact that sent a chill down my spine. I checked my handgun, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility. My training kicked in, a soldier's instincts honed in far-off lands now surfacing in the heart of Montana. I began a methodical check of the ranch's defenses. Windows, doors, all potential entry points were secured, my wheelchair an extension of my determination. Jack offered advice, his knowledge of the land and its secrets, a valuable asset. As the day progressed, the storm showed no sign of letting up. We were a small island in a sea of chaos, two men bracing against the unknown. I kept a watchful eye on the soon-to-be-dead CCTV, the intruder a phantom just beyond our reach. Jack's condition was a constant concern. I prepared meals, ensured he stayed hydrated, and monitored his blood sugar levels. His gratitude was unspoken, but I saw it in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of our shared burden. The intruder appeared sporadically on the screens, always just out of reach, a shadow moving with the storm. Each sighting was a reminder of our vulnerability, a puncture in the illusion of safety. As night fell, the storm reached a fever pitch. The wind was a banshee's wail, the rain a relentless assault. The ranch, once a haven of peace and solitude, was now a fortress under siege. I sat by the radio, sending out periodic SOS signals. 3 short bursts followed by 3 longer beats, and finished by 3 short beats again. Each SOS signal a beacon of hope in the darkness. The generator, our guardian angel, kept the lights on and the radio alive. But we knew, like everything in life, things die eventually. In the deepening gloom, a new sound emerged, the faint hum of an engine. I strained my ears, trying to discern its origin. Then, on the CCTV, a vehicle appeared, headlights cutting through the storm like a lifeline.
Someone's here,
I said, a mix of relief and apprehension in my voice. Jack tried to sit up, his warrior spirit undimmed.
Friend or foe?
I watched as the vehicle approached, its form obscured by the rain. It stopped near the main gate, the engine idling, a pause that felt like an eternity. Then the vehicle turned, its light sweeping across the compound before vanishing into the storm. The intruder, a ghost in the tempest, remained elusive, their intentions unknown. We were left in the wake of the encounter, our hopes raised and then dashed. The radio remained silent, our calls for help unanswered. The generator hummed on, a testament to our resilience, but the feeling of isolation was palpable. In the flickering light of the cabin, Jack's face was a map of lines, each a story of a life lived hard.
We'll get through this,
he said, his voice a low rumble of conviction. I nodded, my resolve steeling.
We will.
The night was a vigil, a watch against the unknown. The storm raged on, a symphony of fury and chaos. And we waited, 2 soldiers in a battle against the elements and the unseen. But as the hours passed, a new determination settled within me. This was our land, our fight. The intruder, whoever they were, had underestimated us. We were not just survivors. We were warriors, bound by blood and forged in the fires of adversity. And as the first light of a new day broke the horizon, I knew that the storm would end, and we would face whatever it had hidden. The intruder, a shadow in the tempest, would be revealed, and we would be ready. Dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and somber gray, a brief respite in the relentless storm. The silence in the cabin was tangible, filled with a tense anticipation. Today was the day we'd face our unseen adversary.
Let's go over the plan again,
Jack said, his voice steadier than before. I nodded, unfolding the ranch's layout on the table.
We'll use the remaining few hours of the CCTV to track the intruder's movements. I've set up traps around the perimeter, tripwires linked to alarms. If he tries to get close, we'll know.
Jack's eyes traced the lines on the map, his tactical mind assessing every detail.
Good. Remember, he's armed and dangerous. Don't take unnecessary risks.
I looked at him, a wry smile on my face.
Not my first rodeo, Uncle.
He chuckled, a sound that warmed the cabin's cold air.
That's my boy.
The morning passed with an eerie calm. We monitored the CCTV, our eyes darting between screens, searching for any sign of movement. The rain had eased, but the clouds hung low, a heavy blanket over the land. Then a flicker on one of the screens caught my eye.
There,
I pointed.
by the west fence.
A figure moved stealthily, cloaked in a dark poncho, their face hidden behind a mask. The intruder was cautious, avoiding open spaces, moving with a predator's grace.
We need to cut him off,
I said, reaching for my handgun.
I'll take the west corridor. Keep an eye on the screens.
Jack nodded, gripping his rifle.
Be careful, Alex.
I maneuvered my wheelchair through the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. Every soldier's instinct in me was on high alert. I reached the west corridor, a narrow passage with a clear view of the fence. The CCTV feed showed the intruder moving closer, unaware of the trap I'd set. A simple tripwire, connected to a loud siren. It wouldn't stop him, but it would give us his location. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. Then, a sharp crackle over the radio, and the siren blared. The trap was sprung. I steadied my handgun, my eyes fixed on the corridor. The intruder appeared, moving swiftly. But he stopped, sensing the change in his surroundings. Our eyes met, his hidden behind the mask. A moment suspended in time, a silent acknowledgement of the game we were playing. Then, he moved, a flash of motion. I fired, my shots echoing in the narrow space, but he was fast, unnaturally so, disappearing from view.
Alex, report.
Jack's voice crackled over the radio.
He's heading north,
I replied, wheeling back to the main room. Jack was already on the move, his rifle at the ready.
We'll corner him by the barn, and Alex, watch your crossfire.
We moved in tandem, a well-rehearsed dance of hunter and prey. The barn loomed ahead, its large doors swaying in the wind. The intruder was there, his back to us, as if he'd been expecting us. He turned slowly, the barrel of his gun visible beneath the poncho.
Drop your weapon,
I shouted, my own gun trained on him. For a moment he hesitated. Then, with a fluid motion, he raised his gun. A shot rang out, but it wasn't his. Jack's rifle spoke, a single, precise shot. The intruder stumbled, his gun slipping from his grasp. We approached cautiously, aware that this might be a ploy. But he was down, a dark stain spreading across his poncho.
Check him, I got your 6.
Jack ordered, covering me with his rifle. I moved closer, my heart racing. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of our ordeal. I reached the intruder, turning him over. The mask came off, revealing a face I didn't recognize. Young, almost too young, with a look of surprise frozen in his extremely bright blue eyes.
Who is he?
Jack asked, joining me. I shook my head.
Don't know, but he's just a kid.
The realization hit us both. This intruder, this threat, was just a young man, caught in a game too dangerous for his own good. We stood there, the storm a distant echo, the weight of our actions a heavy cloak around us. The confrontation was over, but the questions remained. Who was this young man? Why had he targeted us? What drove him to this end? As we pondered these questions, the ranch seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake a new mystery, one that we were determined to unravel. But for now, we had survived. The ranch was safe, the intruder no longer a threat. We had faced our enemy and emerged victorious. Yet as I looked at the young man's lifeless face, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. In war, as in life, there are no winners, only survivors. And as we carried him back to the cabin, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a solemn light on the land. The storm had passed, but its shadows lingered, a reminder of the darkness that had descended upon us. But we were still here, still standing. And as long as we had each other, we would face whatever came next, together. The sun, now fully emerged from behind the retreating clouds, cast a warm, golden glow over the ranch. The storm's aftermath was a landscape transformed, wet and glistening under the morning light. In the distance, the sound of engines grew louder, breaking the silence that had enveloped us since the confrontation.
They're coming,
Jack said, peering out of the window. A convoy of trucks, rugged and mud-splattered, rolled up to the ranch. Our neighbors, faces etched with concern and curiosity, emerged. They had received our SOS. The leader of the group, Sam, a burly man with a grizzled beard, approached us.
Heard your call. Everything all right here?
Jack nodded, his expression somber.
Had a bit of trouble, intruder.
The neighbors exchanged glances, the news unsettling them. In this close-knit community, any threat was taken seriously.
We took care of it,
I added, gesturing towards the barn where the intruder lay. Sam and a couple of others followed us to the barn. Their reactions were a mix of shock and disbelief as they saw the young man's body.
Do you know him?
Jack asked, his voice steady but his eyes searching for an answer. Sam shook his head.
Never seen him before. Doesn't belong around here. I'll call Sheriff McComb to come pick him up.
The mystery of the intruder deepened. He was a stranger, his presence unexplained, his motives unclear. The questions loomed large in our minds. Who was he? And why had he targeted the ranch? The neighbors helped us move the body to a more dignified location, their movements respectful. In the face of death, even strangers deserved a measure of grace. As the neighbors worked, I noticed something peculiar. The young man's clothing, upon closer inspection, revealed pockets sewn into the lining, stuffed with what appeared to be handwritten notes and a small USB drive. Jack noticed my find.
What's that?
Not sure.
I replied, examining the items. Looks like he was carrying more than just weapons. The notes were cryptic, filled with coordinates, dates, and names that made little sense. The USB drive, however, was a potential goldmine of information. But without the means to decrypt it, it remained an enigma. After the neighbors had left, offering further assistance if needed, Jack and I sat in the kitchen, the notes and USB drive spread out before us.
This doesn't add up,
Jack said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Why would a kid like that come all the way out here, armed and dangerous? I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities.
And these notes? They suggest he was on some kind of mission.
but for whom and to what end?
Jack mused. The questions hung in the air, unanswered. The mystery of the young intruder had only deepened with the neighbor's departure. His identity was unknown, his purpose unclear, and his connection to us, if any, a puzzle. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch. The day was ending, but the mystery was just beginning. We were no longer just defenders of the ranch. We had become detectives in a story that was far from over. As night fell, the ranch settled into a tense calm. The events of the past few days had taken their toll. The confrontation, the storm, the arrival of the neighbors, it all felt like pieces of a larger puzzle, one that we were only just starting to piece together. Jack's eyes, heavy with fatigue, met mine.
We'll figure this out, Alex. We have to.
I nodded, a determined resolve settling within me.
We will, Uncle Jack. We owe it to ourselves and to him,
I said, glancing at the notes and USB drive. The night enveloped the ranch, a blanket of stars overhead. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered, a reminder of the fragility of our existence. In the silence, I thought about the young man, about the journey that had brought him to our doorstep. His story was unfinished, a chapter in a book we were yet to read. And as I looked out at the vast Montana sky, I knew that the answers were out there, waiting to be uncovered. The mystery of the intruder, the secrets he carried, they were all part of a larger narrative, one that we were now inextricably a part of. The night deepened, and with it, our resolve to uncover the truth. The ranch, once a place of peace and solitude, was now the center of an unfolding story, one that promised to reveal secrets as vast and deep as the Montana sky itself. But for now, we waited, watched, and wondered. The mystery of the intruder had only just begun, and the journey to unravel it promised to be long and winding. But we were ready, Jack and I, united in our quest for the truth, whatever it may be. The following morning brought a crisp clarity to the ranch, the air fresh from the storm's cleansing. Jack seemed rejuvenated, his strength returning. But it was more than just physical vitality. There was a resolve in his eyes, a readiness to confront the past. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun casting long beams across the room. The notes and USB drive lay between us, silent witnesses to the mystery that enveloped us.
Alex, there's something I need to tell you.
Jack began, his voice steady but laden with an unspoken weight.
About the intruder and why he might have come here.
I leaned in, sensing the gravity of his words.
What is it?
Jack sighed, a deep, weary breath.
Back in Nam, I was part of a classified operation. We were testing experimental drugs on soldiers, stuff that was supposed to enhance stamina, strength, make super soldiers.
I listened, stunned. This was a side of Jack I'd never known, a chapter of his life shrouded in secrecy.
These drugs,
Jack continued,
they had side effects, dangerous ones. Some men, they changed, became something else, something monstrous.
I felt a chill despite the morning warmth.
You think this intruder was one of them?
Jack nodded solemnly.
It's possible. The notes, the coordinates, they could be connected. Maybe he was looking for something, or someone.
The implications were staggering. The young intruder, the cattle mutilations, they could all be linked to Jack's past, to a secret long buried.
But why now? After all these years?
I asked.
That's what we need to find out.
Jack replied, determination stealing his voice. We spent the day scouring the notes, trying to decrypt the USB drive. But without the proper equipment, it remained locked, its secrets just out of reach. As dusk fell, we ventured outside, the need to secure the ranch pressing upon us. The intruder's body, which we had left secured, had vanished. A trail of blood led towards the mountains, a silent testament to the unresolved mystery.
What in the fuck? How do dead guys get up and walk?
I said, scanning the horizon.
Whatever's happening, it's not over. And how in the hell does a dead man get up and leave?
Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the vast expanse.
It doesn't make sense, but this land has secrets, Alex. Secrets that are coming back to haunt us.
The night passed uneasily, as we pondered a possible Lazarus roaming around. We took turns keeping watch since our CCTV was dead, but the ranch was a fortress against unseen threats. But no further intruders came, the only sounds the nocturnal calls of wildlife and the whispering wind. Morning broke with a revelation. I had been working on the USB drive, trying different combinations, when suddenly, it clicked open. The contents were a jumble of files, maps, documents, and a series of videos. Jack and I huddled around the computer, watching the first video. It showed a younger Jack in military uniform, speaking about the drug trials. His words were clinical, detached, but his eyes betrayed a hint of doubt, of unease. The other files were reports, filled with scientific jargon and chilling accounts of the drug's effects. Some soldiers had exhibited extraordinary abilities, but at a terrible cost. Their minds and bodies warped, they became something less than human.
We were playing God.
Jack said, his voice barely a whisper.
And we paid the price.
The final file was a video clip of the soldiers who had been part of the trials. Some were marked as deceased, others missing, and one guy stood out, the dead soldier who apparently had vanished into the woods.
That's him,
Jack said, pointing to the guy.
The intruder, he was one of ours.
The realization hit us both like a physical blow. The intruder had been seeking answers, perhaps seeking Jack. The cattle mutilations, his presence at the ranch. They were all connected to a past that refused to stay buried.
We need to find out more.
I said, a new purpose igniting within me.
Find the others. Uncover the whole story.
Jack nodded, a resolute fire in his eyes.
We'll do it together. Uncover the truth no matter where it leads.
The day was spent making plans, reaching out to contacts from Jack's military days, seeking any information on the remaining soldiers. The ranch, once a place of solitude, was now a command center, a hub of activity in our quest for answers. As night fell, we were no closer to the truth, but our resolve had only strengthened. Power had been restored, but the mystery of the intruder, of Jack's past, was a puzzle we were determined to solve. The ranch was quiet, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. The secrets they held were slowly coming to light, revealing a story of ambition, tragedy, and unintended consequences. But we were ready to face whatever lay ahead, to confront the ghosts of the past and bring them into the light. As I looked out at the starlit sky, I felt a sense of kinship with Jack, a bond forged in the crucible of shared secrets and shared burdens. Together, we would uncover the truth, no matter how deep it lay hidden. And in that moment, I knew that the journey had only just begun. The ranch was safe, but the story was far from over. The shadows of the past lingered, but we would chase them away, one truth at a time.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Quantum Dispatches and stay tuned next week for another thrilling adventure. Thank you for listening.